Hey you guys, Marlyn with Beautiful Bina Designs here to share with you 3 different ways I use to color my stamped images. I had previously shared that alcohol marker coloring is not a favorite practice of mine. I will include alcohol marker coloring in this video, but I'd like to start with what is my favorite way to color my stamped images, and that is by ink blending a piece of cardstock, then going over that ink blended piece of cardstock with my stamps and die cutting out those images. Today I'm going to be using products that I received in the April 2018 My Monthly Hero card kit. We're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm using the inks that came in the kit, including the Fiesta Red, the Fiesta Teal, and the Fiesta Yellow. Right now, I am laying down some base color, which we'll build upon. Again, in an effort to keep things simple so we can kind of compare the different coloring styles, apples to apples and with ease, I am going to stick with simple stamped images as well. Today we will use the cacti images that came in that April 2018 card kit. You may notice that I am using a piece of pink paper as my craft mat. I'm not going to get into that too much today, but I will have a future video coming up which will be my opportunity to share with you my opinions on when to save money and when to spend money to buy the, let's say, leading products and more expensive products versus maybe some value options. Dee Dee, I know you're waiting for that one. Thank you for your patience. It's going to be the very next video that I create. So getting back to what we're doing here, again, I'm just blending, making some green here. I think I want to darken this up just a little, so we'll bring in a little bit more blue. I am going to add just a touch of red. Now I know that you don't need red to make green, but that little touch of red will give me some dark spots in my cacti. You do want a little bit of variation in your colors. And these 3 colors together, of course, will make brown. And if you've ever noticed, cacti typically do have some brown spots. So let me pull in just a little bit more yellow over this. Touch more blue. And then we'll get moving on. Now once I've made the stamped images, colored them in 3 different ways, I'd like to spend some time together and make a card out of those things. I was wondering how much to include in this video, and ultimately I decided to really focus on the coloring. So most of the other work and creating the other elements to the cards I did do off camera. So now that we've blended that paper, I'm taking a little bit of water and I'm just going to sprinkle it on. I like the look it gives, and again, reminding you that the inks that came with this kit are water reactive. So right now we'll pull away that water, gives you a very nice look there, and we'll place that aside to dry. Going to take a baby wipe, clean off my craft mat, dry that, and we'll move into the second option for how I color my stamps. This one is going to be with watercoloring. So the first thing I do when I want to watercolor my stamps is I emboss them. So I'm using VersaFine pigment ink. I'm going to emboss these with a clear embossing ink, and that actually creates a ridge which enables me to watercolor with ease. So let's go in here, tap this down, get a nice even impression. That looks good. Again, bear with me. I'm going to clean my stamps off with that baby wipe very quickly. quickly. I like to keep those in good shape. And then we'll come over here. I have clear embossing powder by Hero Arts, one of my favorites. And we'll just come over this. Now, of course, I have my anti-static pillow on my desk right here. And as I'm going through this video and trying not to take up too much of your time, I forgot to use it. So I just am blowing off some of that extra embossing powder. So I would definitely recommend that you use the anti-static pillow, and normally I would. Forgot this time. Should still be okay for what we need to do. Now, forgive me as I turn on my heat gun. I do make my videos in one shot. I don't edit them. That's a goal of mine, to kind of figure out exactly how to do that, but I haven't got there yet. So as I allow my heat gun to heat up, bear with me and try to ignore the noise. Okay. I like to hit the back first to kind of counter any warping that we know we'll get as we heat emboss the front. And look at that. It's always fun to watch the embossing powder melt. Okay. Now we are ready to begin our watercoloring. Again, I am going to use the stamps that we got with this month's kit. I'm going to use one blue, 2 blots of yellow, and 1 blot of red. I have just a thin line paintbrush that I'll use for this, nothing too special. And the first thing we're going to do is make our first shade of green. Go in here and start painting that in. I like to put down the green completely covering the cactus and then go back in and add some different shades. This is one of my favorite ways to add color. Color blending being my absolute favorite, and this is probably my second favorite. As I've mentioned a couple of times now, alcohol markers, I don't know, I think that it's a little bit too detailed. I like to be a little bit more relaxed when I'm crafting. I don't really like to worry about all of the blending and staying in the lines and all of that. So I recognize it as a way that other people may relax, but for me it has the opposite effect. I like watercoloring, and then I really like the color blending on the cardstock. So you don't have as much control with the color blending, kind of just get what you get. But that's probably what I like most about it, because it's a little bit more abstract, and you can really have some fun with it, at least in my opinion. So here I'm moving on now to the second cacti. I'm not sure that there's a ton of value in having you watch me color all of them. So let's just do a little bit more and then maybe move on. Now you may notice I went a little bit out of the line there. That kind of stuff doesn't bother me too much, but if it bothers you, and if it's a little bit worse, something that I do, you just take a white gel pen and roll right over that where it went outside the line, and you will see that it becomes almost impossible to notice that little bit where you went out the line. All right, so we'll go ahead and fill in these flowers a little bit with that red. Trying to stay in the lines, but also trying to rush. Now, if I was not doing this on camera, I definitely would take a little bit more time with it and make sure that I was using different shades and really getting a little bit more interest in there. But I think you get the point. So we are going to move on a little bit now to, that's the watercoloring, to the third and final stamp coloring method that I'll be including in this video today. So we're going to go ahead and get some of this out of our way. We won't be needing this craft mat for this type of coloring. And to save time, I have already stamped the images for this one. I used a Memento ink, which is alcohol marker friendly ink. And I also have, I like to take a little piece of paper and make those swatches, those little tiny lines I use as swatches, so that I know what I'm working with. We'll go ahead and start with this one. Now, these alcohol markers are not Copics. I have not invested in Copics. These are by Shuttle Art, I believe. Yes, Shuttle Art. I've never used Copics. For me, these seem okay. And honestly, given that I've decided I don't really love marker coloring, I'm kind of glad that I stuck with something a little bit more friendly on the wallet. I will go ahead and add a link to these markers. I purchased them from Amazon, and you can read some of the other folks' reviews and see if this might be a good starter marker for you. Somebody recently, I think it was Desiree, with Include a Thank You and Then Some, she said something in a recent video about it really doesn't matter which alcohol markers you start with because we all graduate to Copics eventually anyway, which I think there's probably some truth to for those folks who decide to stick with the alcohol marker coloring. The Copics or even Spectrum Noir seem to be the industry standards. But for me, I just wanted to get started with something that was more affordable. So you can see that I am by no way an expert at this coloring. I don't really have a best practice rockin' here, but I go with what I like, and when I'm finished, if I like the final result, I make a card with what I have. If I do not, then maybe I don't make a card with it. One of the strategies that I like to practice when I'm doing like a 10 cards 1 kit or something like that. I haven't actually done a 10 cards 1 kit video, but when I'm making a bunch of cards with one kit, I like to create just tons of elements first. So I'll do some coloring, stamping and coloring like this, or my embossing and that kind of thing. And then I will just I have a few different bowls that I use to hold those different elements that I create. So that I can sit down then and just start making a bunch of cards at once and not worry about stopping and starting to create those colored stamp images or that type of thing. So I'm not going to make you sit there and watch me color all of these. I'm not an expert colorer. I'm not even a good colorer, but I did want to show you that this is one of the ways that I might color in my stamped images. So now that this color blended cardstock has had a chance to dry, we'll come back in, and when I put my stamps on this cardstock, I will look for placement. I will look at my stamp and try and think about with the different colors and how they landed on that cardstock, where is the best placement for each individual stamp. So I don't stamp them in a cluster like I did for the coloring. the marker coloring, I go in much more purposeful, and I see there's a little bit of that red right here, so I'll put in the top of this stamp where there's some flowers. And again, I'm using that VersaFine ink on this project as well, this cardstock. And so I've got that one there. And then I'll come back in with this saguaro cactus, and I'll look for just different shades of green. And I like the way that looks right there, so I'm going to stamp that down. And then I'll come back behind there. Again, I'm just trying to keep my stamps a little clean here. And I'll take another cactus with those blooms on them and come over here and try to take advantage of some of that red again. And I think as I'm trying to keep my head out of the frame, I may have shifted that image a little bit, but I do think that this is good enough for you to get the idea and understand where I'm coming from. So finally we have one more cactus, and we'll just put that little guy right there like that. Now we've got the 4 cactus where I've tried to make use of purposeful placement on that color blended cardstock. Now with cactus, it's green, doesn't make that much of a difference. But when you use images that have different colors in them, or maybe you've color blended a piece of cardstock that has 3 or 4 unique looking colors, that's when your placement, your purposeful placement, is going to be a little bit more important. So these color blended stamps, I would now run these through my die cut and cut them out, but I actually have already done that with a set that I made earlier. And I'd like to use these now to make a card. So as I mentioned, I have already created the different elements for this card. I didn't want to take up a ton of your time working on other things. This is a background that I created using that blanket pattern Bold Prince Hero art stamp. I did another video on that specifically, and I will link to it here. I absolutely love this stamp. It has appeared on many of my cards this month, and still I can't get enough of it. You can create a lot of different looks with it depending how you use it. For this card, I used a clear embossing ink and a white pearl embossing powder. And we will be putting the cacti down, as well as this looking sharp sentiment that I have created. So let's go ahead and build that card. I'm trimming looking sharp to fit a little bit better across the front here. And we will pop that up using some fun foam. And I'm going to put the fun foam near the bottom of the sentiment so that I'll have a little bit of space on the top if I wanted to tuck those cacti in. Now this is already sticky, but I'm adding some multi-medium matte by Ranger, I believe it is. Yes. Because this is embossed, I like to give a little bit of extra glue to really hold it on there. I buy my multi-medium matte in a large container, and then I transfer it to the Doris fine tip bottle. All right, now we decide where we want to put each of these cacti. I think maybe I'll pop that one up. And again, trying to keep this really simple so that we can compare the different looks easily and not get distracted by too much else that may be going on. All right. Yeah, we'll go with that. So let's take these away, and we'll use that multi-medium matte again to glue these down. Now again, because of that embossing that's on the panel, we'll want to put a little bit of a weight on these as they dry. So I will use my acrylic blocks to do that. And again, trying to move quickly here. I know that this video is getting lengthy. And let's pop this one up. Okay, again, still using my fun foam to pop these stamped images up on the card. I do like to add dimension to my cards. I think it makes them more fun. This is not something you have to do. You could get a similar look just gluing them flat directly to that card panel. Okay, so we're going to move the acrylic blocks for a minute, glue these up. And I made 3 cards that are very similar, this being the third, so that we could have a look at how the different coloring methods look different on a finished product. All are slightly different, but very, very similar. So we're going to scoot this out of the way for a second and just let that adhere for a moment while we start working on some other parts of the card. This is the card background. I am using a standard A2 side fold. And we are going to use a mat that I have embossed. I love the look of embossing. Embossing folders are inexpensive and easy to use, and I just don't think you can beat the bang for the buck or the bang for the effort. Doesn't that look nice? Alright, now ordinarily I'd wait a little bit longer, but again, I'm sure you guys have other things to do today. So I'm going to also pop this panel up. And center it on that dry embossed background. And as a final touch, I have a few sequins over here that I will add. Two shades of green we'll be using today. One more dark green. Now, here is the look that we get with the color blended cacti on that looking sharp card. I also created one using the alcohol marker colored. And then finally, with just a little bit of a switch up on the banner, here's one using that watercolor look. So I'm not sure which I think looks best. They all look similar, a little bit different. I do think probably this watercolor one is something that I like the best of the 3, but it could be because of the different banner, and then instead of the white detail I used the pearl white embossing powder on this one. So I don't know. Please, if you wouldn't mind, drop me a comment. let me know which one you like best. Thank you for sticking around with me today, and I hope this video will inspire you to make beautiful things. See you next time.